Consistency. It's an easy word to say. It's not such an easy word to follow through with. What's shaking, bacon? My name's Bruno Panucci, and I've been doing this way of eating, this carnivore lifestyle, for about 14 months now. I was doing it on and off since 2018 and extremely low carb since 2013, on and off. I did it consistently for a year, and then I did it inconsistently after that for a number of years till I came across Carnivore in 2018. And it was so close to what I was doing. Really, the only thing I was still having on the other way of eating was protein shakes and lettuce. One of the problems I had with all this low carb eating was it aggravated my gout because I had lost so much weight doing this. Now, I've lost 150 pounds doing this way of eating, about 100 just in the last 14 months or so. So this has been something I found difficult being consistent with. And I had a few challenges that were making that so. One of them was my gout. I was dealing with gout probably about 5 out of every 7 days a week, easily. So I was on regular anti-inflammatories, and it was not easy until I found a way to finally manage the gout. And I managed it through dealing with metabolic syndrome. And so that's a whole other story. But I finally took care of that one thing that was continually sabotaging me. Now, the other thing that was continually sabotaging me was a sugar and carbohydrate addiction, because once I went off the wagon, I found it difficult getting back on. So one of the things I learned was how bad my addiction was. That's why I originally saw this doctor in 2013 and 14, was to manage that addiction. And I did that way of eating for a year. It was really low calorie, but it worked. And I lost a bunch of weight doing it, but I put some on by the time I got back to 2018. I liken myself to a plane taking off on a runway. You know, I was just always kind of going, I was on and off this way of eating for a long time. And being scared of getting gout and kidney stones, again, was a big issue because every time I started losing weight, I was dealing with this gout. Once I accepted that I was eating this way and how bad my carbohydrate addiction was, it really made a big difference. And it took binging for 4 months after I had to put my dog down. And that dog, I can honestly say, was one of the best things that happened to me in my life. I didn't handle her death well. And I just binged for 4 months straight. I mean binged. I ate nothing but pizza and ice cream for 4 months. And when I say I ate nothing but pizza and ice cream, that was probably 98% of my diet for 4 months. That's not good. And that's when I realized, after a few months of not being able to slow down, I thought, wow, this problem's worse than I realized. And it changed my life. I realized how bad it was. I almost had like an out-of-body moment, an experience of when I thought, what am I doing? This is really far gone. And that was the other challenge I had to deal with. So it's about being honest with yourself. And it took me a long time to be that honest with myself. In that time frame, I also had a heart attack, and I still didn't manage my carbohydrate addiction. Think about that. How far gone someone has to be to have a major heart attack. We're talking 100% blockage in my right coronary artery. That's one of the worst heart attacks you can have. 50% of my heart didn't get any blood. And I still didn't manage my carbohydrate addiction well because I was still dealing with gout and I was still dealing with my sugar and carbohydrate addiction. Once those two things got handled, it was easier to move forward. Now, when it comes to being consistent with anything in life, but especially a carnivore diet, you have to look at why you're doing this. Make a list of motivations. You're doing this for what reasons? What's your top reason? What are your next 3 or 4 reasons? And you have to reevaluate that list all the time. Maybe more time goes by and you might find other positive things to reinforce. After 2 weeks, your snoring might go away. After a few days, your inflammation goes away. Write all those things down as you're feeling them so that when you get to the point after a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you might fall off the wagon, you can look back and recognize all the positive things you did. So now you have your initial goals as to why you chose this carnivore way of eating. And then you have these other benefits, these other things that can motivate you. One of the things I found that made this way of eating easier for me is staying full on the foods I was allowed to eat. It's easy to stay consistent with this way of eating when you stay full because you're learning your hunger signals, and you don't want to confuse your hunger signals with cravings. There's a difference. You have to learn to get more in tune with your body. Now, I was pretty good at that. What I found worked for me to help with consistency was just staying full. Eat even when you're not hungry. You're gonna be going through carbohydrate and sugar withdrawal. It's gonna make you want to have food you're not allowed to have. And if you're not hungry, you're barely gonna feel that sensation. When I stay full on this way of eating, it probably knocks that sensation down by 80 to 90%. That's pretty huge. So that's one less huge obstacle to deal with when starting this carnivore diet. And dealing with that will help you stay consistent with this way of eating. I don't recommend ignoring cravings. It's not a bad thing to do in the beginning to try and avoid having those cravings to begin with, but eventually you're gonna have to deal with it. And eventually your appetite will go down. So even though I was having a lot of food in a day, and I'm talking about 5 to 6 pounds of meat in a day, that eventually will taper down. Now, surprisingly, it hasn't tapered down that much for me now. You won't need that food to help get you by. I can have as much food as I want or as little food as I want right now, and I'm not gonna crave things that are not on this carnivore way of eating. But you have to learn to acknowledge cravings. And I don't recommend ignoring cravings. I recommend substituting those cravings for the bad foods with good habits or good foods. So always keeping food in your fridge is a great way to go, because that way when you start having cravings, you're not thinking, I want to do anything else but this, and then you start obsessing over it, and then before you know it, you give into a craving eventually. Or maybe someone in your family is offering you food, or if you're at a friend's house and they're offering you food. If you're already full, it's not going to be an issue. If you already have food in the fridge that you can grab so that you can substitute that craving for, say, a junk food with a meat cookie or like a burger, that's really going to help manage that craving. And just eating some food, or some people find putting a bit of salt in your water helps. But what you don't want to do is ignore it, because it's going to feel like you're holding your breath underwater. And eventually, when you give in, you're going to give in. So you want to try and be positive and give yourself positive reinforcements. Whenever you cheat or treat yourself to food you're not supposed to have, you're resetting your sugar addiction. This isn't like some other way of eating for most people. This is something most people have to abstain from the bad foods. Because when you have those foods, whether it's an alcohol or junk food, your body's sugar craving can reset. And then you have to deal with some of the problems and cravings again. And then you're just constantly, every week or 2 weeks, you're going through what should have been done in a 2-week window. You're going through it and dragging it out for months straight. You don't want to give yourself negative reinforcement, because it's bad enough when you have something you're not supposed to have. I know what it's like when you have something on this way of eating that you're not supposed to have. And what happens is you eat it, and then afterwards you think, why did I do that? I just sabotaged myself. I know better. You feel guilty afterwards. You know you did something you shouldn't have done. But what happens is guilt is not a positive way to get over a bad habit. Beating yourself up isn't a positive way to get over a bad habit. You wouldn't let other people talk to you that way. Why are you doing it to yourself? I'll get back on the wagon on Monday. You don't want to do that to yourself. It happened, move forward. You can't change the past, but you can learn from the past. Instead of feeling crappy about what you did to yourself, focus on how many times you've gotten back up in the past with your way of eating. Focus on the amount of time you were doing a good job, not the one time you did a bad job. You don't want to minimize what you did. You want to acknowledge it, but you want to move forward from it. It's time to focus on all the things you're doing right. Setting goals up for yourself is another good thing to do. Something I find helpful is having goals that complement what you're trying to do. So what you're trying to do is stick to a zero-carb way of eating. So find other goals to make that goal easier, so you can be more accountable to yourself, so that you can be more consistent. As an example, if you find you skip breakfast in the mornings, have dinner ready the night before with enough food cooked that you can have some leftovers at breakfast, so you don't have to worry about cooking anything. If you find you're sleeping in too much in the morning, give yourself a realistic time to wake up and a realistic time to go to bed. That will help with your consistency. That's going to help manage your hormones and your blood sugar. So it's going to help with your weight loss, which is going to be motivation for you to eat this way more consistently. Kelly Hogan offers a group, a support group, and maybe that's something you may want to look into. So you want to be accountable, not just to yourself, but to other people. And one of these support groups is good, because in this support group, there's 30 other people, and you're in a Facebook group with them. And you post when you're having struggles, when you're having difficulties, when you're doing good things. And other people can give you positive reinforcement. When you do something wrong, these people can hold you accountable. You don't just need a pat on the back. You need people to be accountable too. And one of the best parts about one of these groups is it's not just a bunch of peers. You have a coach with years of experience to help you through this. I highly recommend getting into one of these coaching groups if you can, because it's going to help you through the difficult times, especially in the beginning. As you go along, It's gonna get easier, but you're still gonna have challenges, and you don't wanna be arrogant enough to think that you're untouchable at this point. That's a bad move. That's where I got to after a year of being carb and sugar free back in 2013 and 14. I got to the point where I thought, I could handle this. And I had a little bit of junk food once a week. And then after the second month, I had a little bit of junk food twice a week. And then into the third month, I had a little bit of junk food all the time because I thought I could handle it and I couldn't. I learned a valuable lesson. It's like being a recovered alcoholic. I can't have a lick, taste, or bite of anything I'm not allowed to have on this diet. So what I have to do is keep myself accountable. And one of the ways to keep yourself accountable is find your tribe. Find people that you can build up and find people that can build you up. Nothing's better than when you build people up. Recognize self-sabotage. What areas are you always putting yourself in that make you go off this way of eating? Is it because you're giving into your sugar addictions, or is it because you're doing emotional eating? Is it because you went too long without eating? Because maybe you're trying to fool around with intermittent fasting? Well, you gotta be honest with yourself and recognize what things are sabotaging you to keep you from being a consistent carnivore. If you're gonna pick up exercise to do with this way of eating to help keep you motivated to feel good, don't overwhelm yourself with too much exercise. Make it manageable portions, windows of exercise. I want to succeed with this way of eating. I want you to succeed with this way of eating. Finding anything in life you want to be consistent at takes effort, and it takes a lot of effort because it's easy to fall out of these habits. That's why most people, when they start a New Year's resolution, they don't get too far into it. Some people do, and depending on how they set themselves up for success, makes it more manageable for them. Any extra goals you give yourself, they all should complement your main goal. Keep yourself accountable, keep the motivation flowing strong. The better you do all these things, the more consistent you'll be with what you're doing. After a while, the sugar cravings go away. After a while, you're not going to crave the junk food, and you're not going to put yourself in self-sabotaging conditions. Remember, you're the one that's putting this food into your mouth, nobody else. You want to find ways to prevent yourself from cheating. And that's where you got to be honest with yourself. Anyway, take care. We'll touch base in another video. I hope this was helpful.